welcome to another episode of The Meta. I'm your host, Jay Larson, and joining me this week for a very special episode is the most active player of them all, Mr. Christopher Davies. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Jay. Hi, everyone. My name's Chris. I've just won a local Steam Whirler. I've never done it before. It's been super exciting. And thanks for having me on. So we can brag about it.
You betcha. So, I guess start off for people who haven't heard you on this podcast or any of the others. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name's Chris. I play Khador, and I also play a bunch of random factions that I actually pretend to play to disguise the fact I'm still playing Khador.
And as a point of order, you are a Khador player, sir.
Yes. Like, I've dabbled in Mercs, I've dabbled in CG. I think I even have Scorn models, and then every time it just seems to always loop back to the center. I'm just like, yeah, we're back to the motherland. For me personally, I've got a pretty impressive rap sheet, but I've won the WTC twice. I've won Lock and Load and War Machine Weekend, which it was called at the time, and that was all in 1 year. That was yeah, I wonder if we'll ever get the chance to do that again. Might be fun. I've been playing since basically Mark II, and it's been an interesting and wild ride, so to speak.
All right, so I guess before we dive into listener questions, I am interested in hearing, I guess, some of your thoughts on what Cancon was like. I know that there's a lot of people who are excited at the prospect of getting back to playing events and playing tournaments and are curious what that experience is like currently.
Well, first of all, fucking big-ass shout-out to Tom Oliver, or Tomo, that he ran the event and that the event actually went ahead, because we were all like, there's currently an Omicron outbreak over in Australia, and we were concerned that it was just basically going to get canned. Or that, he'd give up. But he persisted through, and given the circumstance, he ran a freaking amazing event. We had about half the numbers we had pre-COVID times, which honestly is super impressive. Admittedly, for this a big number for America, we probably had about 35, 36 runners, compared to the usual 70 or 80 we'd be getting, which I know for American size is small, but for Australia it's pretty big. In fact, it's generally speaking the biggest event we run. For my part, I basically went to Cancon. I've been pretty busy recently, and I personally got the spicy cough over the New Year period. So I did a bunch of. I obviously, like everyone else, looked at the dynamic update. I got pretty excited for it, and then I never got really a chance to play. I got literally one practice game on War Table when I had COVID. That one I used to basically look and try some jank with Karchev 2 and just work out what actually worked with him or not. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. I then ended up, I played in, not the theme you want to play into Circle. I then played with no guns into things you want guns for. It was a shit show. It was good though, because it was just okay, this is why, it helped me figure out some stuff with Karchev 2. So for what it's worth, the lists I took were, as I mentioned, aforementioned Karchev 2, and the one people seem to be talking about, which is Erusk 2 in what is colloquially known as Stalingrad, so Winter Guard Command, and I had a pretty mediocre amount of models, about 57 dudes, which by Stalingrad standards, honestly, was pretty low, but, it's a new list, new year, new me, all that sort of thing.
All right, so overall, great time was had by all.
Oh yeah, it
Okay.
was great. It was also it was a freaking Shark Tank in there, but still was damn good.
Awesome. All right. Well, we've got a bunch of questions. Just as a reminder, we will be chatting with each other for 40 or 45 minutes on this first episode, and then there will be a bonus episode that is for the patrons of the show. So first questions are from Tokenator. He says, Chris, you've brought back Stalingrad. Why did you choose to run that list archetype again, and what are its strengths and weaknesses?
Okay. Well, first things first, why did I choose to bring it back again, and what's its strengths and weaknesses, right? So Stalingrad, for anyone who doesn't know, the list I specifically took was Erosk 2. His battle group was a Spriggan and a Marauder. I took a War Dog as an attachment there for Erosk, literally just as a model to do damage, and countercharge and return behind the lines. Solo package was Alexia 2, Kovnik Joe, and the 2 Winterguard artillery guys, because they're now really good. Then the unit package is where things get a bit interesting. In the event that you've not heard or seen the latest update, it's going to sound really wonky. So I have 2 mortars, which which makes sense. I have 2 units of assault commandos with a flamethrower each, which is a bit of a and then 2 units of rifles with 3 rockets apiece, min riflemen that is, and then a max unit of Winterguard infantry, the basic type with a UA. So what's changed with Stalingrad is through the update, it's not that it really got cheaper, it's that it got a shit ton more options. Namely, what they've realistically done is, with the points drops, it's easier to fit things like artillery in, and the riflemen are also, a minion of riflemen is 1 point more than a minion of regular Winterguard with unit attack Winterguard. So now it's much easier to do that. The second big thing, by far the one that everyone seems focuses on with good reason, is the change to the assault commanders, which is pretty simple. They gain the tag Winterguard, which means that you can buff them with Kovnik Joe, and you can also sack pawn to them. And that means that, so if you look at the assault commanders, the stats on paper, they're just mat 6, power 9, and then you read the back of their card. You get a power 11 on the charge, and then if you bear strength them, that goes to a casual power 15. Which is, those aren't rookie numbers. Those are pretty fucking good. And the final thing that changed is that the artillery captain lost his literally useless ability. I think it was like close fire or something, and he just gains veteran leader. So this plus the change with the Spriggan now just shoots flare on its mortars, means that the list is now a lot more accurate than it used to be in the past. And it also is just it's significantly more accurate, and now it's got this melee counter-punching threat that that cannot be understated. Like, assault commandos, especially, I hate to say, I didn't think I'd ever say these words, but assault commandos with battle lust will fuck things up, and they'll fuck it up real good.
All right.
So the reason I specifically brought it back, though, one, it's a list I've played in the past, so obviously, let's do it for old time's sake, right? So that was the thing. The 2 and the other thing that's probably more important, more relevant, is that a lot of the models that preyed upon it, they've fallen to the wayside. So, for instance, one of the things that in the past was really fucking bad to deal with this is, just generally speaking, Archons, but Void Archons in particular. Like, the Void and Death Archon, when you think about it in a list like that, it's just going to be, it's like, if you let one of them get in, it's bad. Sprays in general also aren't great for the list as well. And if you get jammed up in melee, you have some issues. Plus, let me be blunt, Stalingrad is one of those lists which is just annoying to play. That's one of the main problems with it. All of that kind of changed. The other thing too is that I was thinking of bringing it back before, but a lot of the things you wanted to win, play into, you actually wanted Vlad Tufo in Doom Reavers. It was things like Infernals. It was things like, say, Manoth as well, and other things where you'd need a Grievous Wounds answer and you'd want more access to the Doom Reavers. Well, all of that sort of changed as a result of the dynamic update. Like, a lot of those things have gone through the wash, so now there's not as much reason to run it, and I thought, okay, let's bring it back. Anyway, that's a bit of a big roundabout. I'd say strengths and weaknesses. The strength by far is that you're running a spam list that's actually, because of Tactician, Fire for Effect, and Battle Lust, insanely flexible. Like, it cannot be overstated. Erosk's best role is actually Tactician. Because it leads you to do some wonky shit. It means you don't trip over yourself. So this means you have a list that just keeps rolling forward. It puts on shit tons of scenario pressure. After all, how are they clearing your zone? You've got infinite dudes there. Unless their list is basically able to able to deal with that many troops, obviously they're going to have a real big problem. Its weaknesses, though, first is clock. In every game, you're going to find that you run into clock problems, and you need to be ready to practice it. So, two is the second one is, yes, you actually need to practice this list. This is not a free win. You can put the models on the table, and then they'll just jam you with like a bunch of reach models, and you're going to have to try and figure out how to unjam it without like clocking yourself. If you've got infinite time, you can play Stalingrad, and it's fine. But we don't have infinite time. We've got an hour death clock apiece. The final two weaknesses are pretty obvious. It doesn't really like models with good sprays, and weighs around tough. And also doesn't like those kind of class of models that seem to have fallen out of favor a bit. The, killing spree models with grievous wins. It has the tools to deal with them, but try not to die. Because obviously if you get someone like Maxwell Finn in the lines, your opponent might clock himself killing all of your models, but he will kill all of your models.
All right, so next question from Tokenator. He says, I'm having a lot of fun with Sorcerer 1, with Winter Guard, Assault Commandos, and triple range mercenary shenanigans with Desmond Gubbin bringing along Princess Graciela and Malvin 2 for all the guns. However, it feels more like a casual list than a competitive contender.
Sorry.
Have you been experimenting with Sorcerer 1 gun lines recently?
Not for a while, to be honest. I've found with Sorcerer 1, I don't know, like Infernal, like I was playing Sorcerer 1 for a bit, and then Infernals sort of came along. Infernals kind of turned me off of it a bit. And let's be real, Infernals don't have, like, the reason why is you had the Fallen Knight in every list, and you just said that you didn't get a feat. Or you didn't get Freezing Grip, which is pretty much Sorcerer's kit in a nutshell. I personally just haven't tried it, mostly because I've been looking attention elsewhere, though, not because I don't think Sorcerer 1 has the chops. My attention mostly being on, like, basically Card Shift 2, and then we decided instead we wanted to run some degenerate spam, so here we go. Personally speaking, I think, let me see. I don't mind, I think Winter Guard Command isn't bad for Sorcerer 1, I'm just not 100% sure about this, because AKs are not a gun unit, despite the fact they have guns. They have guns for support, and if you're shooting at, say, douche rots or some other random trash, that's okay, but what you're really wanting out of that is, like, what you're really looking at is, things like rifles and rockets and stuff like that. The Desmond Gubbin package with the Gracia, like, I don't mind Gracia. Malvin's interesting. I'm not 100% sure about Desmond Gubbin and all of that. But, I mean, it's Sorcerer 1, so you can sort of do it anyway. I mean, she has nothing really faction, like, she has, like, Fog of War, but that works on everything, so that's fine. Yeah, I'm sorry, I actually don't really have any Sorcerer 1 random nonsense I've been thinking. It's kind of a bit embarrassing. I realized I looked at my War Room thing. I haven't actually made a Sorcerer 1 list since pre-update. Yeah, I've got one here I had for an online tournament, and that's it. Personally speaking, gun lines with Sorcerer 1, I'd say... I think double AKs is always a decent start, though, to begin with, because one of the things you need with any gun line, but Sorcerer in particular, is you need models to actually stand in front to contest on scenario. You could take as many rifles and rockets as you want in the world, and then you'll randomly lose because you're just not far enough up the table, and then they just kill the random guys you've got towed in the zone and just score 3 points and say, over to you, mate. So yeah.
All right.
Jesus, what's he doing? Sorry, anyway, go on.
Next set of questions are from Jacob. He says, Chris, congratulations on the Cancon win. Awesome work.
Thanks, Jake.
And then he says, first off, with Crucible Guard winning the LVO here in America, how do you feel your Karchev 2 list fares against the Gearhart-ass Mountain list archetype?
Let me have a look here. It's on the Discord. So Baldwin with a Vulcan and some other shit. First things first, I don't think Crucible Guard drops this into you with Karchev 2. I mean, they can, but I think they're probably better off dropping in Lucas. How do I think it fares? I think honestly, I've not actually played against this particular cook in a while because, again, people generally don't drop this. They're usually trying to drop Lucas.
Uh-huh.
First things first, this list will fall down dead against Erosk 2. which people might not be expecting, so fair enough if they drop it in and expect a thing. But hey, I don't know what this cast has come. Look, Jay, what has our world come to? AKs, assault commandos, completely tear this list to pieces. Yeah, it's bad. It's like you can't flame burst AKs because they're immune to fire. They actually completely counter failed experiments because their gas, like, despite the fact that failed experiment models have breathers and stuff like that, they don't actually have immunity to the gas effects, which means that you can hit them with the strangling gas, which cuts down their tough and their rapid healing shit, right? But I guess that's not the question. The question is, so like that would be a problem there, and if your opponent is cognizant that, he's probably not dropping Baldwin anyway. For what it's worth, against Kardchev, I think it depends on what your support package is. Baldwin is probably still not going to enjoy dealing with a Clamjack with a buff on it. I think this is one of those matchups where you use the Clamjack, you use a Devastator. So for what it's worth, I did say I paired Erosk with Kardchev 2. So my particular Kardchev 2 cook I settled on, it was in Jaws because it turns out Pathfinder and everything is really good. It was Kardchev with Behemoth, Devastator, 2 Juggernauts, 2 Marauders, and he had an Adjunct to go with. You got Sorcerer Zero running another Marauder. Other solos were Widowmaker, Marksman, and a Widget, and then 2 units of Kayazi Eliminators. I'll be blunt, I picked this list. I picked Behemoth because I found that if I had literally no guns, it was boring and pretty monodimensional, and you kind of tended to lose because you had nothing to threaten any of their support pieces. And Behemoth will do, over the course of the game, infinite damage. Plus, he fixes one of Kardchev's weaknesses, which is that Kardchev has, he doesn't have any damage buffs, so you need to bring high damage jacks. Hence why I've also got 2 Juggernauts in there as well. Now, you could cut Behemoth for a 3rd Juggernaut and take, Cossites. That also works. You can also cut it down, take more solos. You can rearrange things to try and get an 8th jack in there. Personally speaking, I've just liked this because I wouldn't say this is optimal, but it's just nice and very well-rounded. I found that one of the issues with Kardchev 2 is scenario, because you don't have enough decent scenario pieces unless it's one of those scenarios where your jacks can score. Because, like, Recon 2, for instance, is great for Kardchev 2 because he doesn't really need the solos. He himself can sit on the flag in your zone, meaning that they never really can stop you scoring, and you don't need to do things like, it's not like, say, Split Decision, which is the one with the circle and the 2, like, all of the stuff on the offset, the offset scenario, where you're basically having to spread out wide. Like, he can still play into it because with a 16-inch control area, it turns out you can have a Devastator in your opponent's zone on bunkers under locked horns while you're sitting in your zone, which is, at the time that my opponent, who at the time was Batesy, found that out, it was just like, this is fucking bullshit. Good reason. So, let's see, what would I do against this? I think it's probably fine, but I think it comes down to table setup. In a car park, honestly, Baldwin probably eventually wins. But the thing is, Baldwin's threat on Kardchev, assassination threat on Kardchev, is nowhere near as bad as Lucas's is. So, yeah, that's my, roundabout thoughts there. I think you can eventually lose because you just get ground out if you don't have because you don't have the cleanest answer to the medium-based infantry. But let's be real, this is like Crucible Guard medium-based infantry. This isn't the shit show that is when you're having to play into, say, let's see, old school Thon, for instance. He does hit hard, but Baldwin himself is not exactly leveraging it so much. And also you're not playing a gun line, so the Mentalists are a bit like, well, you're going to spend most of the game just using the Mentalists to trying to shoot the Mentalists with, like, Behemoth or something like that. The other thing, too, is that it's very difficult for Baldwin to protect his Vulcan from Kardchev 2, because you'll literally be just probably saving the feed just to kill the Vulcan. And you know what? Perfectly legit. When the finale, I suppose, is that Baldwin will basically have to, Baldwin's Baldwin can only realistically swing by 4, and that's using his feet. And if he uses his feet for that, he is a bit in danger. Baldwin does tend to run hot. Now, that's like a possible armor swing is obviously nothing to scoff at, but it's not exactly the most dangerous in the world. And you're dealing with lists which can So one of the reasons I keep saying like, oh, Lucas, is that Lucas can comfortably put -6 on Karchev himself, fish him out, knock him down, do whatever he wants with Force Hammer and TK, and then just kill you, and has significantly more Vindicators. By contrast, a Vulcan isn't as dangerous as more Vindicators for Karchev too. Anyway, yeah, that's a lot of things saying like, I think the answer is like, it's probably fine, but you'll probably not see it.
So if you do end up facing a Crucible Guard player and you are expecting them to drop Lucas, what is generally your response and what's your experience of how that plays out?
Truth be told, I didn't really put as much thought into it because I was actually trying to figure out more of a circle answer, and I wasn't sure how many people be running CG at the tournament. Turns out at least a couple were, but I managed to dodge them, so yay, go me. I mean, that is one part of the tournament. It's just like luck of the draw sometimes.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll be blunt. There's a good chance you could have had Josh Bates on here, who would be bragging about how he ran into me on like turn 2, on like second round. I played some trash with like a shit ton of models, and I spent the entire game tripping over myself trying to kill his everything. I would probably drop Erosk too, just because I don't think Karchev has the best matchup into Lucas, and but it depends on what the CG player is actually playing, because not all of them do actually play Lucas, and their pairing might be different. For instance, Silvestro is not exactly comfortable to play. Like, it's not exactly great playing a solid ground caster into a caster who has, I don't know, purification. Although you can, and is pretty much immune to guns. But yeah. Personally, I'd probably just drop Erosk too and let them try and deal with it. It turns out AKs actually are pretty good into some of the things. Like, they cannot be gassed by Vindicators, because they have alchemical masks. So that helps. It means that a lot of them times they'll have to legitimately fight into you, but they can probably still do it anyway. The main problem with fighting into CG is their trains, Railless Interceptors. If you can't peel away their Mentalists, their Interceptors are really hard to crack at range, and that's where you realistically have to. And, you know, if you leave them to live for too long, they will just eventually, like, mow you down with sprays. And they can back up out of threat range a lot of the time as well. So either you push scenario really hard and you use that to basically force the Railless to commit, or you try and you use like cheeky sea rats and stuff like that to scalpel out the Mentalists and then shoot every fucking rocket and mortar and whatever at your thing and try and take the Interceptors down. If you do that, I think it's going to be a bit messy, but it is probably a playable game, which is nice. The good thing, for what it's worth, is that unlike with Karchev, who will casually get hit with -6 armor, get pulled out, one of the reasons I'm even saying all of this is because Whaley played a game into Josh where Whaley is playing Karchev too, but he's in Kriegs. So he's in Black Industries, which is the theme that gives him Carapace. He has Inflictors and all the other random tools of war, and he died. And he still died when he moved Karchev a bit too much up, and he got pulled in, pushed next to a shield guard, and turned around. So it didn't matter in the event that the Vindicator shot got shield guarded, because Karchev was still going to be under Withering Humor. It was all bad. Because Karchev's a construct and a living model, you can hit him with Rust and the Dragon's Breath effect. And then when Vindicators shoot at you, they can also hit you with their like extra die of damage. So that's all fun.
All right, so next question from Jacob. He says, is Stalingrad really as terrible to play against as I think it would be? When do you drop that list, or is it more to strike fear into your opponents?
So this is the part where, like, Stalingrad looks like a derpy dude spam, and it's actually a pretty intricate list, so it can be. It's terrible in a different way. You'd think it'd be just like, it just walks up, it C-rats all of your guys, and then you can't really do anything because there's too many dudes on the table. Yeah, that is a part of it. The other thing, too, is that because you've got Tactician, and you've got a Control Feat and everything else, you're also going to come in, like, you will win against most melee lists in general. Your Winter Guard infantry have sprays on their mini feat, and if anyone hasn't seen it, the fact that you can Joe buff them and then buff them with the artillery dude man means that they're charging Rad 8 sprays, which mean in a lot of infantry mirrors is generally enough to win the infantry fight by itself. In the event that you need it after post mini feat, you have flamethrowers. So yeah. When do I drop that list and what it's striking? Honestly, that'd be a generalist list I'd drop in based on what counters my opponent has. It'd be more about what my opponent has that could deal with it. Like, I mean, hypothetically, like if you ran into a Retribution opponent with like 6 of the Gorgons, I think, the ones with the sprays, and they had like some other shit that stopped you having fun, then you probably at that point have to reconsider. And the other lists that are kind of just a bit wonky. But one of the reasons I'm even playing this list in the first place is a lot of the counters have fallen the wayside. Like, there's no Void Archons are way less prevalent, for instance, and they were a big problem for a long time. And yeah, it's also I'm gonna be honest. It's not like I got as much practice as I wanted, so I literally went to like Cancon to get the practice in. Because in the end of the day, there's no substitute for tournament experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I drop the list and try and strike fear into the opponents, or just give them a brain aneurysm. It's actually, I'm gonna be honest, it's actually worse for you as the player of Stalingrad than it is for your opponent typically, because you have to move all the guys around, and then they get a bunch of time to figure out the problem. But then you're also gonna be under more clock pressure in general. Yeah, because just by nature of the list, it's not like the equivalent list in say Trolls, which has been popping up a bit, either Madrak 1 or Madrak 3, with like 3 units of Krill warriors with cavers and the Northkin raiders even, and then like a bunch of beasts, where all of the models are pretty simple. It's like you have Krill warriors, you apply battle loss to them, you go charge in, and then you have the remaining ones run behind. You've got models with guns, and they have multiple attacks, and they also have intricate rules, and they sort of work together with each other. But that means also you can just trip over yourself. So yeah.
All right. So next question from Jacob. He says, were there any other Jack build-outs for your battle group that you were considering? Have you ever run your Karchev 2 list with a Colossal?
I haven't tried with Karchev 2 with the Colossal, although that was one of my earlier cooks. I did try him in Winterguard Command, which was the game I was alluding to earlier, where I was like, oh, let's see how this goes. Because I have a really nice Beast 09 I wanted to put on the table, but honestly, the problem, like, I really would like to. Beast is actually really fucking good with Karchev 2, but the rest of the list isn't quite as good. Generally speaking, I've mucked around with the loadouts. That one there is, like, there's a couple here. Like, I have an 8 heavy version, which is pretty cut down simple. It just has, like, more Marauders in it. So, yeah, like, it's about trying to find that magic number. And as I said, like, I was mostly looking at Karchev 2 to play into, say, Circle, or at least force the issue against Circle. Because I knew that was going to be a thing. Like, my old buddy James Morehouse, and surprise, surprise, we did in fact meet in the game. I'm considering playing with a Colossal, especially in one of the other themes, like, say, Winterguard, if we go back to that. It might be a thing. But at present, no. And one of the reasons why is that Behemoth does very similar things to a Colossal, right? And I have a feeling he fits Karchev's build better. Not the least of which being that you could take Behemoth and a Marauder in place of, say, a Victor, and it's cheaper still. And let's be real, like, whatever we dress this up is, you are playing Karchev 2. You are going to be the bully of War Machine. Just take more jacks. It's fine. As for Erosk 2, that's a very standard battle group. Spriggan Marauder is literally the battle group of old. You want the Spriggan because you want an answer to stealth. And you want an army-wide answer to stealth. And hitting something with Flare, especially even with an Artillerist reroll and all of that other jazz, is a pretty good way of solving that. And it means also that if you flare something, you don't have to Joe buff other models in order to get them to hit, especially if it's like a def 12 to 14 target, right? Because you've already dropped the flare, and then between that and the Artillerist Captain, you're now actually rolling in at, say, Rat 8 or something functionally, which is a decent enough value for you to actually get your shots in. So that's a particular reason why. And the Marauder just to fill points. You could probably look at something different. I have toyed around with it, like taking, say, even a Decimator for the knockdown gun, knockdown threat with Energizer, or even Beast 09, because Beast 09 is just awesome. But that's, I think the Spriggan probably has to stay.
All right, so speaking of Moops, his question for you is, for Chris, why you stand there, you just get assassinated.
Look, James, I left Chromac alive for one too many turns. I tried to play attrition, and then you just kept Chromac there, and you said no fun, and I'm like, fuck you, I'm having fun, and then I killed him. For what it's worth, that game was like Moose has obviously thought about the matchup, so he found a big obstruction in the center of one of the zones and like jammed Chromac in under his feet as far as he could and had Bestial up there. So I had that particular game was interesting because I could have gone for the assassination the previous turn, but it would have relied on me killboxing myself to get out of Bestial range in order to cast my spells.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty full on, right?
Yeah.
And the game wasn't going so bad that time that I felt the need. And then the next turn, Moops hit back pretty fucking hard on account of I couldn't cast Locked Horns because I can't because I'm under Bestial. But I managed the previous turn got in his well. I could have finagled it that I kill his well the previous turn and be able to cast spells afterwards. And I think if I were able to re-rack that game, I'd probably look at doing that. But, that's that's something for future consideration, I suppose. And obviously, like in the heart of the moment, I wasn't really cognizant of. Plus, at some point, Moops freaking killed my like widget with a random, like literally the perfect deviation. I'm like, okay, good job, Moops. So I couldn't fix one of the Marauders to get it to charge the like thing before Karchev activated. Anyway, while you stand there and get assassinated, look, Moops, look, this is just what I do. I play attrition. You try and kill me. For once in my life, it's the other way around.
The tables were turned.
Yeah, I mean, killing people is pretty fun. Not gonna lie. I can see why James does it all the time.
All right, so we've got a bunch of questions from Bennett.
All right.
Go to some of his later ones first. He says, I don't see a lot of Zerkova 1 in Flames in the Darkness. Why is that? She seems like she has a good toolkit, only missing a threat extender.
Yeah, so you're only missing a threat extender, so we're moving on.
It's kind of funny to me. There's like the diversity of opinions on Zerkova 1 with Khador players, because there's I interview some Khador players who think that she's best in faction, and then I talk to some Khador players who basically think she's trash tier. So I guess defend your position on her being trash tier, Chris.
Okay, you know what? Fuck it. This is a podcast. Yeah, she's garbage. Okay, so it's not that she's missing just a threat extender. She's also missing a damage buff or like our accuracy or damage fixer. Now I know Flames fixes that because you got like 5 sources of damage fixing or whatever, and all of you guys hit hard, but it's still a problem. And look, it's just still not great. My main problems with Zerkova 1 are, while her feat is extremely good, people can get around it in a lot of ways, and specifically I mean dedicated shooting lists, which is realistically the main thing the feat trumps. It also is good into melee infantry, don't get me wrong, because, being able, and a lot of there's some matchups where it is a true proper time walk, but in a lot of ones, they kind of just either back out and like shoot you, or they ignore Zerkova, or like Zerkova has to be so far forward to truly leverage that feat. Otherwise, what they'll do is they'll basically they'll start shooting at your other models on the outskirts, and they'll just move models in that don't really care about the feat. The other thing too is that Zerkova 1 has a very poor end game, and that is realistically what it comes down to. Like, you have to get so much out of your feat, because if you don't, you're not really getting much in the rest of the game. Like, you're basically blasting a spell away and hoping for the best. Now, some things do help with that, like the new Thamrite Advocate is pretty good with Zerkova, but is it good enough to fix this? The other thing with Flame in the Darkness is I would actually rather play Zerkova 1 in Wolves of Winter if I was to do so. It's just a better list in general, honestly. And both of them, frankly, have been, quote, nerfed, compared to what they used to be. So it's a case of Zerkova 1's sort of fallen a bit behind. If she had a better late game, I'd probably consider her more. But she actually, I'll tell you what it really is that she's like a bad version of Cold Grandma, which will be maybe a bit contentious. There's your clickbait right there. Cold Grandma has a worse feat, but she has a way better game. Zerkova basically has a giant power spike and then falls off very quickly. The power spike obviously being the feat. Zakova, Cole Grammer by contrast, like if you've ever played into her, she's just blasting people and vanishing and apparating and doing all this stuff all game long. It means that her presence is just like better throughout the course of the game. Plus, she just has native dark power, which means that Zakova's spray is dangerous, especially with like Thamrite at Archons and Advocates to pretty much give you the free rerolls. But it's not as good as as Cold Grammar's one. For one, Cold Grammar's one is longer range and doesn't rely on you hitting the Rod of Torment. And for two, Cold Grammar, despite being an old granny, is in fact super mobile, which is great. Yeah. But it's a case like I'd rather play and it's actually if you want another thing too, having played Flame the Darkness in Mercenaries, Zakova 1 is also a worse version of Fiona, even pre-nerf. Even post-nerf. And you're just like, well, that seems shit. But yeah, that's the main thing is like me personally, I prefer a caster with a more like overall stable game plan. Like you compare Zakova 1 to Irosk 2, like we're doing right now, and it's just like Irosk 2 has so much passive power he's going. He just never runs out of gas as long as he's got guys to buff, right? His tough doesn't go away. Like the only thing that goes away is his control feat, and honestly, his control feat is probably better than Zakova's, right? And then for everything else, is like none of his passives go away. He's just constantly going to be a pain in the ass, and so he does Zakova's job better. Plus, he does have a threat extension, and if it does not, if anything, I would actually look at playing Zakova 1 in say Winter Guard Command. One, Social Zero fixes your lack of threat range, and two, from what I've personally found, is that she's actually a pretty good Winter Guard caster on account of you can use her aggressively in order to shut down the shooting and just keep smamming rockets until people just fall over and fucking die. I remember playing that a while back in like Sweden. That was pretty fun.
All right, so next question from Ben Up. He says, what's your answer in the mirror match, and how does that generally play out?
I don't think I'm going to mirror into myself, because I don't know anyone else who's actually playing Stalingrad, but if in the case it does, I'm not 100% sure. I think the mirror is, I don't think Kharchev 2 can play into Stalingrad for what it's worth. Look, it honestly depends, like, in a general, if we're talking about generic Khador players, it completely depends on their matchup, because for instance, you could play a Rusk 2 into like any Jack Brick, it will be probably fine, right? But you definitely cannot play Rusk 2 into, say, an old school Vlad to Doom Reaver spam. I mean, you can, and it probably will still be fine, but it's also just going to be awkward, and you might randomly die. And then there's going to be other counters where it's just like, ugh, this is just gross. And then probably to make me eat crow, you're going to randomly play that Zakova list in, like, Winter God. And they're going to fuck you up. But no, it's like, that's the thing. It's like, because Khador as a faction has like, is infinity options and ways to play it. So congratulations. You're going to have to look and judge based on your own pairing. And sometimes the answer is you look and you realize that your Kharchev 2 is better than their Kharchev 2, and you don't give a fuck about their off list, so I guess you're playing Kharchev 2. Welcome to the party. Also comes down to scenario as well. How does the game play out? Well, it's a mirror match. Be better than your opponent, which is the boring answer. Realistically, mirror matches in Khador are going to be, like, you look at Khador lists and, like, there's very little overlap of casters. So it's not like, say, if you had a Crucible Guard mirror, you can comfortably expect that one of the lists is going to be Baldwin or, Lucas. So that's how you'd play it. Like this one of their mid lists is probably Kharchev 2, but not necessarily. And go nuts. Good luck, because they could have like freaking Strakov 1 in there, and then all of a sudden your list has to change a bunch. And just like, well, what are we doing with our lives? And then obviously they could have some trash like what I've got. They could be going back to Flame the Darkness, anything really. If you want an easy example of why, of a list that say would be horrible to play into for me with like say Stalingrad in the mirror match, is that Zakova 2 like full on degen list, which is basically where you take Zakova 2 and Wolves of Winter, and then you pretty much take everything that's got magic on it. So you take your double units of Greylord Turnian, you take like 1 to 3 Advocates. You take a Victor as a battle group. You take Ion and Holt with Valachev, and you take 3 units of Greylord Turnian with your Rect slots, and round it out with the Colden Lords and the Thamrite Archon. And you just put the Apparition on the Greylord Outriders, the Spray Donkeys, and look, at any point in the game, you can run those guys 20, like, Apparate 2, run 18 with Pathfinder, and then pop Zakova's feet and just spray. Well, I mean, like, that one is like your opponent might clock yourself spraying all of your guys to death, but they will probably spray most of your army to death, assuming they don't just kill you, right? And like that list as a thing is like if you played that into Stalingrad, you would probably be able to attrition that list off the table unless Stalingrad is able to snipe out enough donkeys and keep Irosk safe. Otherwise, like you're gonna walk up and like Ion is gonna run and then be like zepped forward and then gonna be hit with harm under signs of portents. Sorry, occult whispers. And with a reroll from a Thamrite Advocate, a Coldenwall's going to run up and do the same thing with Brittle Frost. Zako is going to hit you in the face with one of her nukes, and then there's going to be infinite sprays coming in. Cool, okay, all of that is like really, you're going to have to like basically abort mission, and then you just play Kharchev 2 into that, right? And like Kharchev 2, it's a case of, well, I don't think Kharchev 2 is going to really care, especially if he just like looks in, just death wards himself, camps a bunch of focus, and just goes, okay, cool, we're just going to, do whatever you want. I'm going to make a Jack Brick, and I don't care anymore. So the TLDR is that it's a Khador mirror. It's going to be weird. It's going to come down to what your opponent has and how like likely you think they're going to go for some balls-out assassination. So enjoy.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and pause there on this first episode. Mm-hmm. Chris, wanted to thank you very much for making the time to be on the show. I know life's been a little bit crazy for you, so definitely appreciate that.
I was coughing earlier because I drank some coffee and then it was just like went up the wrong way. It is quite early in the morning, yes. No, but my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And thank you to all the patrons who are supporting the show. You guys are awesome. And as always, check out discountgamesinc.com for your gaming needs.